You can have as many assets as you want because it's an insurance program. They consider it an entitlement program because you worked and paid into FICA, or someone worked and paid into Social Security taxes. So therefore, the adult child or the disabled widow or widower or the disabled adult who paid in can own 5 cars and 10 houses and whatever they want to own as far as assets. Social Security does not look at it. Well, welcome back. Good morning again.
Thank you.
So in our last video, part 1, we talked about the differences between disability insurance benefits and supplemental security income, commonly referred to as SSDI and SSI. And this week, I wanted to talk about disabled widows benefits, adult child disability benefits, and then child's SSI cases. But before we deep dive into that, I wanted to introduce you again real quick. For those who didn't watch part 1, this is Isabella Baez. She's an associate attorney at Evans Disability. She really focuses on federal court appeals, United States District Court appeals, and then has also done numerous hearings with our firm and has been just a bright, shining star at our law firm, a University of North Carolina law grad, and been with us now for about 3 years. So Izzy, thank you for joining me and going through all this stuff with us. Let's talk about disabled widows benefits first, and then we'll jump into the other 2 programs. So DWB, Disabled Widows Benefits, is another program that we talked about. And in that program, what are the technical eligibility requirements to be eligible for that program?
Sure. So thanks again, Peter, for having me on today and talking about disabled widows benefits. So we had a part 1 of our video and kind of went through the disability insurance benefits program versus the supplemental security income program. And the biggest difference was that the disability insurance benefits program is based on work credits rather than your financial need and asset limits. So similar to disability insurance benefits, here with the widow's benefits, basically the claimant, which will be the widow, will basically try to get their benefits off of their deceased spouse's insured status. So this, program, it's also called the Retirement Survivors Disability Insurance Program, and again, also funded by the FICA tax. And so basically your spouse had been paying into that payroll tax, into the FICA tax. And so talking about the technical eligibility requirements, it's a little bit different based on kind of the marriage status when your spouse actually passed away. So if you happen to have been married to your spouse when he or she died, there are a few things that must happen here. So you must be within between the ages of 50 and 60, and you must have become disabled before your spouse's death or within 7 years after the death of your spouse. So that's one requirement. The second requirement is that you must have been married to your deceased spouse for not less than 9 months immediately prior to the day in which they passed away. And then the third requirement is basically that you did not remarry before the age of 50 unless the latter marriage ends, whether that's by death, divorce, or annulment. And then kind of an extra qualifier here, Peter, is basically to be eligible for widowers benefits as well. You can't, you otherwise be eligible for a higher payout award on a different disability benefits program as well.
Right. So for example, if your own earned income is, and you're disabled, you could apply for the DIB program if your monthly amount in DIB from Social Security is much higher or higher than the disabled widows, you'd want to apply under your own work history.
Right, exactly. So those are basically the qualifiers for if you were married. Spouse at death.
And what if you're not married? What if you had divorced your spouse? What are the qualifiers for that?
Right. So, like, the individuals who were married to their spouse at the time of their death, you still have to be between ages 50 and 60, and you still have to basically prove your disability happened or started before the ex-spouse's death, or within 7 years after the death of your ex-spouse. And one thing different from people who were currently married was that you have to be married to your spouse for 10 years or longer if you had gotten a divorce from this ex-spouse that you're trying to get benefits off of their earnings from. You must also be currently unmarried. And again, similar to the previous, if you were currently married to your spouse, you can't be eligible for higher benefits, such as, the disability insurance benefits program. So
Right.
The biggest things are that, basically you have to prove that you were married for 10 years or longer to this person. You have to be currently unmarried, be between 50 and 60, and then basically prove your disability happened before the spouse's death or within 7 years after the ex-spouse's death.
Right. Also, too, at 60, my understanding is that then they can just go down. They don't have to prove the disability part. So that's why this is for disabled widows benefits. And at 60, we'll meet folks that call in and say, hey, I'm 61. And we're just like, just go down to Social Security. You don't need us to prove the disability aspect of your case. Because like you said, it's for people between the ages of 50 and 60 or one day younger than 60. But you have to prove the disability element, which we'll have another podcast because that can just, we can deep dive into that for a good hour or two about just the sequential evaluation. But I don't want to get too confusing. Thank you. That's the Disabled Widows Benefits program. There's another two programs that are related, and they use the word child in it. And the other program I want to tackle first is Disabled Adult Child Benefits, or DAC. And the reason I want to talk about DAC right after we talked about DWB is because you mentioned that we talked about SSDI and DIB. Then we talked about DWB, or Disabled Widows Benefits, and now I want to talk about DAC because those fall under Title II of the Social Security Act, which is the insurance programs. So those three types of programs, someone worked and paid into Social Security, whether it was you yourself, your ex or current spouse who's deceased, and now we're going to talk about DAC, which would be a parent paying in for their child. So if you could walk us through the elements for someone to be eligible for DAC, that would be great.
Sure. So like you're saying, this is under the Title II program, which is based on work credits of someone. And the Disabled Adult Child program basically provides financial assistance to children whose either parents, grandparents, or guardians, legal guardians, have passed away or are currently receiving retirement or SSDI benefits. So to be entitled to disabled adult child benefits, if your parent, legal guardian, worked long enough to have earned sufficient quarters of credits, basically work credits that we had talked about in the previous video, to be fully insured. And basically the number of years that your legal guardian or parents must have worked kind of depends on the age of what they currently are and or when they died. So the maximum number of years that a parent or legal guardian would have had to work is that 10 years to earn 40 quarters of coverage. So those are kind of a little bit of the technical requirements on the work credit part of it. As for the child, there are also technical requirements for the child as well. So in order to be technically eligible for this program, you, as the claimant, have to be unmarried. You have to be 18 years or older. And then you also have to prove that your disability began before you became 22 years old. So those are the requirements for you as the claimant, as the disabled adult child, and also the requirements for your legal guardian as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so just for clarification, when we use the word child, it's adult child, so 18 or older. And the great thing about, and I want to point out, is that you have to prove that your established onset date is before the age of 22. It doesn't mean you have to prove you were disabled before the age of 22. So, for example, it's a lot like that date last insured thing we just talked about in the last video, is that even if you're 27, 26, or whatever age older, it's harder the older you get, by the way. But if you're still sort of in the range of being able to prove it or have evidence to prove that you became disabled prior to the age of 22, and you meet all the other technical requirements, having a parent or I lost for words, parent and or legal guardian has paid into Social Security and are collecting Social Security, whether it's retirement or disability, then if you are 27, 28, 29, 30, whatever, you can establish you became disabled prior to the age of 22, like that date last insured, then you are still eligible for that benefit.
Correct. And, those are the technical requirements, Peter. The medical requirements are basically the same as an adult, except for kind of one qualifier. If the adult child has not worked, again, this is based on your parents or legal guardian's work credits. There are, a certain amount of steps that SSA will take to find your medical disability, and a disabled adult child can be found if they have no past relevant work. They can be basically found disabled if you're able to prove that you meet a SSA listing, which is basically, there are certain requirements for medical records proving a certain diagnosis or symptoms that you have and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. So those three programs are under Title II. And I want to talk about Title II just real quickly, kind of a side note, general big picture. Because in the last part one of this conversation, we talked about SSI, and then they meet and look at, Social Security looks at all of your assets. We talked about you can't have more than $3,000 in assets if you're married or $2,000 in assets if you're single. They really deep dive, and Social Security will deep dive into your bank accounts, is how much do you have, how much ownership do you have in homes or cars and property and different things. With Title II, meaning those SSDI, DWB, and DAC, they don't care about assets. You can have as many assets as you want because it's an insurance program. They consider it an entitlement program because you worked and paid into FICA, or someone worked and paid into Social Security taxes. So therefore, the adult child or the disabled widow or widower or the disabled adult who paid in can own 5 cars and 10 houses and whatever they want to own as far as assets. Social Security does not look at it. So that's why Title II, in a lot of ways, is a preferred program, because if you're an adult child, you can inherit money and it's not going to kick you off of Social Security. I wanted to make that point about Title II. Now, Title 16 of the Social Security Act is sort of the needs-based program. And the first program we talked about in the last video was SSI, Supplemental Security Income, which I generally just addressed now. But there's one other program in the Title 16 program, which I'd like you to talk about a little bit, and we can deep dive into that. And what's that program?
So there's one more program that we're going to talk about today, and that's the child's SSI program. And it's similar to an adult's SSI program in that it is based on financial assets. But basically, it kind of depends for the technical requirement for a child on the number of ineligible children and eligible children for disability that exists in a household. So, as we were saying before, for an adult SSI, for an individual, they can't have countable assets that exceed $2,000. And for a couple, that is $3,000. For children, basically, it's SSA will look at the parent or legal guardian's total countable income, both earned and unearned, and basically look at as well how many children are in the home that either have disabilities or don't have disabilities. And then there's a kind of a chart, which we can link up in this video, that'll tell you exactly how much the parent or legal guardian is allowed to have for the child to still be technically eligible for an SSI program. So that's kind of how the technical part of child SSI works. There's also obviously the medical part, where, the child's disability has to be proved, within the 12 months. We can dive deeper into that in a different video. So that's kind of the medical part of it. And then the last part of it is basically you just have to prove that you are in fact a child, which means to SSA that you are 18 or under, or you can also be 22 or under and are regularly attending school.
Yeah, no, that's great. So the chart, because I want to talk a little bit about that. So for example, and we will drop a link in the comment section, or not the comment section, but in the description below. If you have 2 children total, one child is eligible for SSI because they're disabled, and one child is ineligible because they're not disabled, let's say. If you are a one-parent household, and all the earnings that one parent earns is all the income that one parent earns from like work, then they say, hey, look, as a one-parent household for earned income, you can have up to $4,369 gross income before that person is not eligible, or that child's not eligible for SSI. And that's $4,369 gross income per month. If it's a 2-parent household and all the income is earned, then you can have up to $5,313 gross income per month. Now, what's interesting is on this kind of next to that in the chart is what they call unearned income. And so they treat that differently. So if you're a one-parent household and you have income of unearned income, which means it could be child support, it could be VA benefit, it could be whatever you're not working for and receiving. And if you're a one-parent household, that's up to $2,398 per month. And a 2-parent household is $2,870 per month. And the more children you have in the home that are not eligible for SSI, the higher those numbers tend to go up. And so, and I don't want to go, and this box goes up to 6 children, and I'll just link it, and I don't want to verbally go through, every box here today, but that's generally how the technical requirements for SSI work. Now, one thing that's interesting too is the other 4 programs, adult SSI, DIB, DWB, and DAC, we have to prove the sequential evaluation, which we'll do a whole other video on. But generally, like, hey, look, do you meet or equal a listing? And if not, we can still win a disability case on those cases by proving they are unable to work. But because children, we don't expect children to work, they don't ask that question from a legal standpoint at all. So for kids' cases, and I'm just going to say this, I'm not going to deep dive into it, but for kids' cases, I think personally that it is more difficult to prove disability for a child, because the only way to prove disability for a child is that they have to meet and or equal a listing for children. So what is a listing? It is literally a big blue book. It's online. It's not an actual book that says, here are the objective criteria that you must meet to be found disabled. And we can do a whole nother podcast on that. But there is no work question for kids. And so that is child's SSI. And we can deep dive into child's listings probably for 10 hours, if not more. Isabella, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and going through these 5 programs. You're such an asset to the firm. I appreciate you. And I think the thing that I admire most is how much you care about the disabled community and their clients. And it really shows through the work you do. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Peter. And it's just really great to see how many people these podcasts are reaching. So it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you.